Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode is about being responsible for your reactions with these three strategies.
And this topic came from a theme that we noticed in last week's sessions. It feels like in 1 week, a lot of the couples will be going through very similar patterns, like something's happening cosmically. And I kept saying this to a couple, and Aaron had some great mic drops as well in the sessions, because we challenge our couples, right? We get in there and we're like calling them out on this and that. But I said this to them and it really hit home. The ultimate sign of a secure marriage is knowing that even if one of you says something at the wrong time, in the wrong way, or with the wrong tone, the other person will be responsible for their reaction. And everyone nodded their head and they were like, yes, that's our goal. Because what can happen so often is that you'll just get caught in these loops where you're pointing the finger at each other and saying things like, well, I wouldn't do this if you didn't do this. If you said it at a better time, then I wouldn't have this reaction. If you said it in a different way, then I would respond differently. And you'll just stay trapped if you're constantly pointing the finger at the other person, rather than you hear us talk a lot about personal responsibility. Aaron, I see you smiling, so you want to say something.
I'm going to say what you just said. It's going to be the same thing, but really take this on as the listener. The ultimate sign of being in a secure marriage is that your partner can say things at the wrong time with the wrong tone and trust that you're going to be responsible for your actions.
So put it on them.
It's just so, as you were going through it, I remembered the sessions we were on. And it'd be just so easy to think, yes, that's what I've been saying to my partner. I want to have a secure marriage, and why can't they just be responsible for their reaction? And it's like, well, yes, as always, we want to bring it back to you. And I guess it's like setting an example, right, for your children sometimes. And so even though your partner's not a child, and I guess sometimes we do react. When we are reacting, probably coming from that inner child place. But if we're going to influence at all, which I think is a lot of times the questions that we get, it just starts with you being the example.
Yes.
And so really for all of us, am I in a secure marriage? Do I want to be in one? Then I have to also let my partner say things with a certain tone or the wrong way, or say things not quite how they mean, and I'm still not going to react. Now, we're going to go into today that it doesn't mean, I really want to make this hit home, because we hear so many times from people, I'm going to really work on my triggers. And I know we've talked about this in various episodes. You have to understand that the trigger is a 3-part thing. There's the event, there's the emotion, and then there's the reaction. And right out of the gate, you can't expect you for yourself or your partner to completely dissipate some of the strong emotions they're going to have to some of the events that are showing up in your relationship.
Yeah.
So you're going to have the emotion, but what we're talking about is being responsible to interrupt the reaction part as you for yourself work on the emotion side of it. And there's various ways: self-regulation, personal development, therapy, whatever your process is, to work through so that that emotion doesn't keep coming up for the event. We still have to be responsible that I'm not just going to react, even if my partner has some tone and has some emotion for themselves, or I was doing something and they just brought this up at the wrong time.
And this is absolutely relevant to getting triggered in conflict, but it's also relevant to just being able to communicate, because the context of when we had these different sessions, yes, it was sometimes about arguing and conflict, but other times it was couples who they have a family together, so they've made other human beings, they've merged finances, they live together, and yet they're nervous or hesitant to bring up certain topics or bring up something on their mind or a quote unquote issue because they worry about their partner's reaction. And this is it. And so you guys are going to like this, because I'm going to give you 4 Ds that destroy your connection.
Oh, there's a fifth one there.
So everyone's going to like these Ds and Ds. Okay. 4 Ds that destroy your connection. And then we're going to go into some very practical strategies for being more responsible for your reactions. So the first D that destroys your connection is deflecting, right? So deflecting is when you take something that your partner brings up or how they bring it up and it's the wrong way, and now you turn it against them. So instead of addressing the thing they actually brought up to you, like maybe they're frustrated about something or they have a request, something's on their mind, instead of addressing what they say, you now make it about the way they say it. Now, of course, we're not saying that your partner should be able to talk to you anyway. Of course, there's honoring boundaries, you guys. We talk about that all the time. However, if you get kind of side railed from communicating all the time because you're nitpicking the way you're saying it and how, and you sound frustrated, can you say it this way? Deflecting, it just feels like, man, can we just talk about the actual thing? So that's the first D. Second D is defensiveness. Right? So we all have, to varying degrees, our guard up at times, right? Like we can take things personally. And in a sense, we do want to have defense mechanisms. They're part of what helps us protect ourselves. However, we can be almost too vigilant, too defensive when what our partner's bringing up really isn't an attack. They just might be disappointed. They might be frustrated. They might have some emotion about something that occurred or didn't occur that they wanted to. And that's normal and natural because we're human beings, but we feel we need to protect ourselves from their feeling or their words or what they're disappointed about. And so we've done whole episodes on just defensiveness because there's a lot of different reasons we can get defensive, but just check for yourself right now how often that comes up and derails your conversations and has you react to your partner. The third D that destroys your connection is denial. So you deny that it's a big deal to them. You deny that their feelings are valid. And at our last couples workshop in person last weekend, someone raised their hand. It was a husband, and it was a great question. We really appreciated that he brought it up. And he said, so if my partner is saying something like, for example, I just don't feel appreciated by you, because they say it, in the heat of the moment or when they're feeling some emotion. And he's like, but I want to argue with the fact that that doesn't make sense because of all these other ways I show them that I appreciate them. And we really liked the question because what we were able to answer with, and this will be something we cover more in depth here in the next section, is that's coming from logic rather than when someone is in a state of emotion. And so we can deny our partner's feelings, emotions, even needs that they're bringing up if, number one, we don't think it's that important or it doesn't make sense to us. So denial destroys your connection. And then lastly, the fourth D that destroys your connection is saying and doing destructive things. So you don't like what your partner said, how they said it, and so then you feel like you can say that little thing, that little jab. And you guys, I'm guilty of this.
Yes,
I did a little couple jabs.
A little bit of humor and an example. I know you've been saying to me, like, hey, get better at your storytelling and your examples.
Have I been saying that to you? I don't know. Oh, I guess I did.
Yeah.
Talk about examples.
So maybe this isn't exactly the right time because I'm telling the story about you.
Okay, sure. Point the finger at me.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's true.
We just had the example the other day. And I did. So looking at this, I did deflect. So it seemed so silly. You were getting Sky ready for bath time. And in my mind, I got everything else. I did in actuality get everything else in the house like cleaned and set up. But then I came back upstairs and in my mind, I was going to not try to stimulate Sky by like coming around the corner and getting her too excited. So I was quiet. And then too quiet to where
startled me. I look in the mirror and he's suddenly there, and I'm in this like dark, like it's kind of dark. There's only one light on, and I suddenly see him in the mirror. So I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, I could see how that was like a movie. And then you just said that you snuck up on me, and then so in that moment, well, my brain is thinking about I wasn't sneaking up. I was just being quiet, and I had this good intention not to overly excite Sky before bed. And then I think there was one other thing that you said, but the point of this being that the next thing you said was something about me not having basic skills?
Well, I know that's going to sound big. I was just like, because one of the things Aaron admittedly is working on ongoingly is just the simple I'm sorries. Like, you're really great at the big responsibility and repair and taking ownership. It's the little I'm sorries, oh, you startled me, and just being like, oh, sorry about that. And so I was just like, hey, you need to get the basics here is what I said. And you didn't like that. Which I shouldn't have said it that way.
Well, not just here. Let's be honest. You did say I don't have the basics.
I didn't.
You
so
did.
now,
That
look, we could talk. We could go into this.
It.
Yeah.
And so the example here being, it all happened so fast. Mm-hmm. I had the best of intentions for everyone involved. Then in my mind, it's like, well, I wasn't sneaking. So then I deflected from just saying, oh, didn't mean to startle you. Mm-hmm. Sorry about that. So that could have been a shift right there. And then then it was you saying I'm a basic partner, basically.
I didn't say it that way.
And then, for a few minutes, then we were just focused on that, right? You were saying I just need to be able to apologize. I'm saying you got to stick to the topic at hand and not call me a basic human being. And so you could just see how it plays out, right? I deflected and then you were destructive. So we were just trying to give an example of saying hurtful things like, something simple, then you just tell your partner, like, why don't you have any basic skills?
And here's the thing. We're able to kind of laugh about these things because we just see these human moments as kind of comical. And here's the thing. We have mastered two things. Being able to de-escalate things, because it's very easy, if I said that little jab and then he gets really triggered, he could take it to the next level and then I could. And now we're bringing up the past and we're bringing up other issues. And for so many couples, it just become so much bigger when it was something small. So we've mastered de-escalating things and repairing very quickly. We de-escalated this, worked through it, repaired in just a few minutes. It didn't hijack our entire night. And so before we go into the next section, if you don't have our two popular guides on mastering those two things, de-escalating conflicts as well as repairing, go get those guides. They're both linked in our show notes. They're very actionable. They have you put these things into practice with the strategies that we have there. So both of those are linked in the show notes, and really highly recommend getting those two and just having them on hand to get better with.
Yeah, and you can bring them up in moments like these. Mm-hmm. We want to give you some other step, and for many, you've probably heard the term active listening, but we just have to bring this back up because marriage is a team game. Communication has two sides. Mm-hmm. There's the speaker and the listener. And often the receptivity and the exchange has much to do with both sides, how it's being communicated and presented, and then also the receptivity to just listen on the other person's side. Mm-hmm. And did we say this a couple episodes ago? Yeah, let me give you from the couples workshop, right? Continue to think about effective communication being that speaking is about yourself. When it's ineffective, your speaking is about your partner, what they did, what you don't like about what they did, all that stuff. So if you switch it, the listening effectively is that you're actually listening to your partner rather than, I know this is a more odd one to think about, ineffective or ineffective communication is you're actually listening to yourself when your partner is speaking. What you're actually listening to is the thoughts you have that are defensive, deflective, denying, destructive. You're thinking, I don't agree with this. This is wrong. Can't wait for them to stop because I got a bunch of facts to prove that they're wrong. So you're actually listening to yourself. So we're not saying to be active listeners all the time. That's really not very practical. But we've been getting very clear that when communication seems to be going awry, there's a little bit of tension. And we also talked briefly on a past episode that we have to allow for a 1, 2, 3 level of emotion sometimes.
Out of 10.
Yeah, out of 10. And when you get to this place where, okay, this could go either way, that's when you want to designate, you know what, we're just missing each other here. And if I'm the one that's feeling like misunderstood, I could say, hey, let's just pause. Let me be the speaker. If you'll just be the listener, and then once you're done, you can have the other person go. But this just allows for a reprieve from where this is about to go, and then allows one partner to step into, all right, I'm going to be the listener. Let me make sure I shift my attention over to actually listening to my partner rather than my thoughts about what they're going to say.
Yes.
And then also gives the speaker a moment, I think, to maybe regulate for a second. I kind of get my thoughts together. We can talk about various other benefits from this, but active speaker, active listener.
So that's the first strategy for really being responsible for your reactions. The second is really a strategy of understanding the brain. And so Dr. Dan Siegel, I've been really into his work. His book is incredible, and he talks a lot in the parenting context. However, his principles could not be more relevant to understanding ourselves as adults and our partner.
And is this The Whole Brain Child?
Yes. So this is the book, The Whole Brain Child. But again, his work, he's a neuroscientist, and so his work can apply to any age. But the second strategy is about understanding your partner. Like, so if you're practicing the first strategy Aaron just brought up and what your partner is saying, you feel the impulse to get defensive. Okay, let me really put this into context into where is my partner at in their brain. And so he breaks it up into understanding 4 parts of the brain. So the right hemisphere, we all know this is well known in psychology, is really more the emotional brain. Okay, so that's attributed to our feelings, the things that aren't as rational, how even our creativity, right? So right brain, feelings, left brain, logic and structure and making sense of things. So you can see right there where sometimes your partner is in their emotional brain, you're trying to defend with something logical. You're having 2 different conversations. It's not effective. So we understand where you're coming from, but again, if you have to think about the goal being effective in your conversations, de-escalating things, and being responsible for your reactions, then you realize, okay, my partner is in their emotional brain. Logic isn't the thing right now. Then there's 2 other parts. There's actually our survival brain. This is the amygdala. So this is typically, like people show it on an image, the back lower part of the brain. This is where our survival instincts come in. Sometimes we want those, right? Like we don't want to have to think for 3 seconds about jumping out and grabbing our kid's hand as they're stepping out into the street, right? We want that to happen in a millisecond without us thinking about it. But the survival brain isn't what we want driving our actions and our reactions to our partner. And he says this in his book, again, it's in the parenting context, but he says a lot of people are actually parenting from their survival brain when their kid is in their survival brain, right? So their kid is having a meltdown, a quote unquote tantrum, or even teenagers, right? Like they're going through something, even being triggered. And then we will parent from our survival brain. Not effective. Same thing. So that night you're talking about in the bathroom and I'm getting Sky ready for bed, not only did you startle me, so my survival instincts were on because I'm actually kind of scared of the dark, gonna admit it. But I also was tired and I was run down, right? I wasn't feeling totally well, but Sky really wanted me to put her to bed. And I was also just ready to, get Sky into bed. It was a long day. And so I was in that moment for a second in my survival brain, startled, jump, right? So I said something, wasn't the best. But being a team player, if we realize our partner is triggered, saying something, they're clearly not in their, what he calls the integrated mind. So where you really have integrated all parts, you're aware when you're in your emotional brain, or you realize when you're coming more from logic, you realize you're in your survival brain. And so having that awareness of where we are, or if our partner's in their survival brain, not reacting to them from our survival brain, right? So do you see how with this strategy of understanding the brain, we can place where our partner's at, place where we're at, and then choose a better response. Now, lastly is the fourth, it's the prefrontal cortex. So if you imagine, I'm putting like my hand on my forehead. So this is actually the part of the brain that's not developed even until our mid-20s. And you could call it the thinking brain. This is where we can plan. This is where we can put things within context. This is where we gain, I think you could say, wisdom. And really just understanding, again, That's where we want to, I guess, consciously live. We want to realize when we're emotional brain. We don't want to out logic our partner. So Aaron, anything you want to add to just really understanding those different parts of the brain?
No, I think you did pretty good. A renowned psychologist, Jean Piaget, in development would call this being the formal operational. And yeah, I don't want to go into more of it. Not every adult actually gets there, but you can track human development from being an infant, to adolescent teen, to even now what's called emerging adulthood, into then young adulthood. And not everyone actually gets here, but from his perspective of tracking and looking at development, the sort of final stage where your brain is fully developed in its cognitive functions would be called formal operation.
And so really, even just referring to, again, Dr. Daniel Siegel, like to connect what you just described, that integrated mind, we want to more consciously respond to our partner as opposed to take what they're saying personally, and they might be in their survival brain or they're in their emotional brain. And no, it doesn't make sense. When your partner is saying something from their emotional brain, it might not add up like 2 + 2 = 4. But that's how emotions are. We want to empathize with emotions. So that's the second strategy, really understanding the brain and placing more where they are, where you are. So the third one is really about then offering a supportive or productive response, right? So based on where my partner's at, based on where I'm at, what is the most supportive thing I can do for us? Putting into context of if they're tired, if it's been a long day, if they have a lot of stress, or for ourselves, or you know what, they just didn't get it right this time. We need to have a bit of grace, because no matter how much we work on our communication, you can learn every communication strategy and you're still going to be human. So we want to, yes, strive for this high standard that we have for ourselves, while also still having grace for those human moments and realizing, like, when my partner's imperfect, this isn't a time for me to now make it worse, right? What's a supportive and productive response right now? So our invitation from this episode is to take responsibility for your reactions. You will stay trapped and stuck in these cycles if you get caught up in those 4 Ds that I listed out. So catch yourself when you are deflecting, when you're being defensive, when you're denying what is important to them or what they're saying, or you resort to destructive actions and words, and use the 3 strategies that we outlined. And again, if you want to put this more into practice, and a lot of people are visual learners, or you want to be able to pull strategies out when you're mid-conflict or after, because a lot of couples will pull out our Making Up and Moving Forward guide after an argument and literally walk through it step by step because they know they can so easily re-trigger the argument. So get our guides. We made them so reasonably priced, so much less than doing a coaching session, a counseling session. So go to the links in the show notes. The Making Up and Moving Forward URL is actually thecouplesexperience.com/repair. So if you want to go and get that one, as well as the de-escalating conflicts. But we really hope you enjoyed this episode. We are taking responsibility for our reactions as well. And if you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can hear past and future episodes. And if you take away value from our episodes, it helps a lot if you will hit the 5 stars. Hopefully you feel we're worthy of the 5 stars on whichever platform you're listening on, and write a sentence or 2. It helps us so much. But with that, you guys, we will talk to you on the next episode.